Welcome back again. In this video, we want to focus on rules-based categorizations. So in the previous video, we looked through individual categorization, which means going to something like this and doing the categorization, either simple or detailed or a few others right here. But when you have, for example, a wallet, I picked one special like this with an extreme amount of consistency, or from the process work that you've done up front, specific wallets are being used for specific functions. You have the ability to create rules that will repeatably categorize things. So let's just focus for right now on February 3rd. So there's about one, two, three, four, five um, activity. It looks pretty consistent. So Bitcoin going out. We could go in and do one by one, categorize each of these, or we could use rule-based categorization. So same thing, transaction screen, and right now we're in the transaction screen, but when we go to rules here. So what we'll do is we will create rule. You can put a name for the rule. Let's call it advertising payouts rule. And then the first thing you can do is you can select a wallet. So in this case, it was the payout wallet. You can define, and I'll explain in full once I type this all out, but you can define the coin that's affected. You can set it to simple categorization and say, okay, this is always going to be advertising expense. And let's call the vendor James Vendor. I'm now just populating the required fields here, and the other required field is outbound. Now, let me just read out what would happen. So this rule is saying anytime you see a Bitcoin outflow, outbound from this wallet, book it to advertising and James Vendor. So every transaction that's a Bitcoin outflow in that wallet would be booked as such. Now, you can add other parameters, which I'm going to. For example, I can say, I just want it to affect transactions that are only on the 3rd, or, a year period or whatever. I can also define specific to addresses that it's going to. So anytime I see a payment to this address, I know that it's an advertising expense to James Vendor. So there's a lot of things that you can do here. And there's also the auto reconcile option. That is something to use very, very carefully, because you're essentially categorizing the rule and auto pushing. We don't recommend using that until you've spent quite a bit of time setting up rules, seen the behavior, and it's happening consistently. The other thing I'll show here is a capability here to add a comparison. So for example, I could say only do this activity for amounts that are equal to 1 Bitcoin, or maybe more intelligently, when the outbound amount is less than 1 Bitcoin, do it, because maybe everything above 1 Bitcoin, I actually want to categorize myself by hand, right? There's equal, less than, you can see some of the other capabilities. So it's kind of a pretty powerful capability that you can set up. You can choose different wallets. You can actually leave this empty, and that this will mean regardless of coin type in that wallet, we're going to process it as such. So that's another capability there. So once you've entered, again, you can play around with this. One more thing here is you can actually set priorities such that, it runs this rule first, and then there's another priority, priority 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth, and it follows the priority of running rules. So there's the ability to do priorities. So I'm going to save this rule, and it'll save it. Something you can do is you can either turn it off temporarily or on. And overall, rules run via a batch process overnight, and that rule will get processed and run in a batch process.